Visit Sailrite.com for all your project supplies, tools, and instructions.
Hi, I'm Seth Grant with Sailrite, and in today's tutorial video, we're going to show you how to make this Dopp bag. This is one of 3 tutorial videos showing how to make our tote bag, our satchel bag, or our Dopp bag.
Order the Sailcloth 3-in-1 bag kit, then watch this tutorial to build the Dopp or toiletry bag. The Sailcloth Dopp bag features a zipper opening along the top. Inside the bag is a cotton duck lining with 4 internal pockets, a webbing tab on one end for easy zipper opening and closing, and a webbing handle on the opposite end for carrying.
You can order this Sailcloth 3-in-1 kit from Sailrite today using a link in the upper right-hand corner or in the description below. This kit includes all the materials you need to make all three of these bags and a pattern that you can use over and over again. As with any bag kit we sell, the techniques you learn in this video will help hone your skills for future projects.
Let's get started and show you how to make one of our 3 bags, the Sailrite Sailcloth Dopp bag. In this first chapter, we'll be cutting out our patterns.
Since filming the first 2 videos, we've come up with a new patterning machine that does a much better job of adding detail to our plotting. So you'll notice this one has a pattern legend. So you can see we have our fabrics labeled by the color that is on the actual plot. Our original pattern only had 1 number. Now we have 1 through 9 all plotted onto the pattern. So this is what you're going to receive, but we're going to show you cutting out the old pattern, so this one's going to go away. So this is the first panel we're going to work with. It has T3 on it. That's probably the biggest piece. And this is our Dacron sailcloth. So we are going to cut this out first. So we'll set the other 2 aside. So we have our 1 yard of Dacron on the table, and you'll see it looks like it's creased and crinkled up. That's because we ran it through a washer 2 times and also crinkled it up a bunch. And what this does is it removes some of the resin and loosens up the fabric so that it's softer. Because Dacron that's new is pretty stiff, and it's easier to work with softer Dacron. So now we're going to take our pattern, and we're actually going to flip it over, and we're going to apply basting tape onto some of these pieces so that we can stick it down to our Dacron. Normally I would use pins, but Dacron is really stiff, and it's actually really hard to push the pins through, so I think it's easier just to put some basting tape. You don't have to baste everywhere, but just want to hold these pieces in place when we cut them out. Now I'm going to peel off all of the transfer paper on each one of these. Now we'll take the pattern and we'll stick it on top here. So I've lined T3 up with one of the corners, making sure it's within our Dacron. And now I'll just smooth it all out and baste it down flat. So now we're going to cut each one of these out on the outside lines around the perimeters of each shape. There are some lines going through the centers with these dash marks. You don't need to cut that yet. You will end up cutting it, but it's for a zipper, so we don't want to do that yet. And the great thing about using this basting tape on the Dacron is it comes off really easily when we're finished, so we'll show you that as well. So as I'm cutting out the panels, I'm going to actually stack them in piles based on the first letter. So these are both D's, so they're going to go in the same pile, and then all the S's, and then the T's. There's 3 different bags on here, and we want to keep them all separate, so when we're working later, it's easier. This is our Sattler marine grade fabric. It's a 100% solution dyed acrylic. And this is our pattern for the Sattler. I'm going to pin all of these panels. The smaller ones, I will put 1 pin on each end, just like this. And then this big one, I'll put 4, one in each corner, just so it doesn't move around when I'm cutting it out. We are going to cut the 6 out, just the patterning material, no fabric, because this 6 is an insignia material that is going to be stuck on and then sewn to the outside of our bags. So we'll set this aside in a spot where we will not lose it because we will need it later. So you are going to have some extra sattler when you're finished, but you can use that for another project if you want. This does make 3 bags, and we are going to use as much of the material as we possibly can. We're going to be cutting it out with scissors. We don't need to hot knife it because all of our edges are going to be bound on all 3 bags, so scissors are just fine. So this is our lining fabric. It's a cotton duck, and we're going to pin our last pattern, which is the largest of them, to the cotton duck, same way we did with the sattler, and we'll cut it out. So the kit also includes 2 samples of insignia material, and we're going to take off the tags. I've already removed one, and then we will show you what's next. We do not necessarily have to remove the staples because we're going to work around them. So I'm just going to leave those on. And I'm going to take basting tape and I'm going to apply it to the back side of the number 6 that we cut out earlier. And I'm going to do this on all the legs, so every part of the 6, because this needs to be cut out as precisely as you possibly can. I mean, you're never going to get it perfect just because it's shapely, but you want to do your best. So basting tape all around, peel off the transfer paper. Okay, and then we're going to take our sample. I don't want the staple to, there you go. And we're going to baste the 6 down right on top. So we'll cut this out, pair of scissors, and we want to be as precise as possible, cutting on the lines, and try to round all the corners just like the pattern is. So I'm going to go nice and slow. When we get to the center hole here, we're just going to fold it in half and start a slit on the back. And we'll use this slit. I'm going to widen it a little bit, so I'll just cut like an X here. Obviously, I don't want to cut into my black lines. And then I'll just cut out to those black lines and then around that circle. So for the second one, you can either remove the pattern material, which is what I'm going to do, and use the pattern again. You'll probably have to redo your basting tape, because, or you can put basting tape on the back side of this and stick it down, but I don't really want to cut into my first 6. I'd rather just cut a new one, so I'm going to remove it and then baste it on there and cut again. Here are the 2 6s we cut out, and I am going to keep this pattern in case I wanted to reuse all of the patterns and make another sail bag, or even a bag with a different fabric would work as well. So I'll keep this and put it in a safe place.
In this chapter, we'll be sewing decorative stitches onto the main body of our bag.
Now we have bag D on the table, so all the panels that start with the letter D are on the table, and we did sort them into piles somewhere else, so it was easy to just grab them all. And then I have one of the 6s that I cut out. And I'm going to start with D1A, D1B, and D1C. So this is panel D1A, and we're just going to cut it in half right across the center on that line. For the Sattler marine grade fabric, we have lines to mark here as well, and I'm going to use the chalk pencil. So I'll just mark the lines on both sides. Got to pull it back a little bit and mark it. Same with this one. And then we'll remove the patterns. Now we're going to use the Sailrite clear acrylic ruler to strike a line across both of these Sattler fabrics. And then we will be applying basting tape and hemming this edge. And this is the top edge for the outside of our bag, and I'll show you in a second what that looks like. So basting tape along the top edge. So this is the short side. You see this is the tall side, short side. We're on the short side. We're going to use the Sailrite canvas patterning ruler to make sure this stays down. Basting tape sticks well, but not super well to the Sattler marine grade or any solution dyed acrylic, so this is a helpful tool. Now we're going to remove the basting transfer paper and baste to that line. And we will once again use the canvas patterning ruler to make sure it stays in place. We just tested the stitch length, and I do like the way it looks on the top side, and the tension looks good on the bottom side, so we're ready to sew. So we have one of our panels here, and I'm gonna put some, this is only one of the panels, the other one I'm not gonna do this on. I'm gonna put some zigzags across here randomly in a pattern that I think looks pleasing, and this is just decorative, so I'm just gonna do some zigzag stitches, and I wanna start at the top and make sure that this is gonna be buried so I don't see this reversing. I'm gonna reverse one time, and then I'll just sew all the way across the panel, the other end, and then do one stitch in reverse, and I'll do a couple of these. And I like to make them intersect because I think it looks cool. So there's one. So now we're gonna sew a second stitch that goes across this line, and we'll probably sew a third one as well. So I'm just gonna do one stitch in reverse, then I'll just sew across. And I'm trying to get it relatively straight, but it actually isn't too bad if it even curves a little bit. Looks pretty cool. So we'll sew down here to the corner. And reverse one stitch. And then I'm gonna take it out and do it again one more time. Okay, so we have our two pieces hemmed, and we're going to apply basting tape along the top and bottom edge on both. But I'm gonna show you how to put it on the panel first so that you don't have to see both. We do wanna use our Sailrite canvas patterning ruler to push these down. It helps crease the fabric and also helps the glue adhere to the solution dyed acrylic. And then we'll peel off the transfer paper. And we want the hem to be towards the top. So we have both our panels here. I'm going to apply it to the one we just put our zigzag stitch pattern in. Right like that. Now you could put the 6 on at this point and have it go underneath this piece. So you could put it on like this and then you'd sew the 6 on first and then baste this. But I like to put the 6 on top for this bag just because of there's not a lot of space. So I'm gonna put this on first and then I'll put the 6 on after I sew these in place. So you'll notice these are slightly different in height. It's okay since when I put it together, they're on opposite sides of the bag, and then the boxing height comes up to here, so you really won't notice. But you could, if you wanted to, move this one down a little bit so they match. So we have our stitch length the same. We're gonna sew a zigzag stitch across here. So we're gonna line this edge up with the left side of our center foot, or the outside of our center foot. And then we'll just sew it across. So line it up. You don't really need to do any reversing because you're gonna be sewing it in later. Sometimes I do one stitch just because it makes me feel more comfortable. Then I'll just sew it across just like this. And I'll repeat the same process with this one. I'm not even going to take it out of the fabric. I will just line this up and I'll sew across onto this one and all the way to the other end. So I have the 6 here now and I've started to peel it off, and I'm going to put it on a little bit crooked because I think it looks a lot better than if it's just straight up. It kind of looks funny if it's straight up. So slightly crooked, and I'll just peel off a corner here and I'll start basting it onto the Sattler fabric. It looks like it's going on really straight there. I don't like that. So you can always peel it back up and do it again. So a little bit higher, and actually I think even a little higher than that. Like right there. Okay, and this is all about preference. I just prefer it to look a certain way. So I'm just gonna peel this off, and you just stick it down as you peel it off so that it goes on there nice and smooth. You see there's no wrinkles. Same zigzag stitch, right side of the inside foot on the outside of our 6. I'm gonna start here at the bottom so I can do a little bit of reversing and it won't show up as much. Hold the trailer forward, little one stitch in reverse, and then I'm just gonna keep that up against the edge, so all the way around it. And this is a stitch everybody's gonna see, so don't go too fast. Straight away, so I'll go a little faster and just keep going. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to get it as accurate as you possibly can. It's off a little bit right there, but that's okay. And then on these corners, I actually like to go back about a half stitch. So when you turn, it falls closer to the edge. And then just keep going around. And we'll also go around the inside of the little circle as well. Okay, we're coming up to the end here, and I'm just gonna do a couple stitches in reverse right on top of the other stitches. And there we go. And then I'm gonna sew around this circle on the inside as well in the same manner. It's the same process, so.
Next, we'll be adding pockets to our lining fabric.
So now we have panel D2A, D2B, and D2C, and we're gonna cut D2A in half, just like we did with the sailcloth. Before we remove the pins from D2B and D2C, we're gonna put little marks on top of our marks here so that we can strike a line across for a hem. So now that we've put those marks on, we're gonna remove the pins, and then we're going to put the patterns aside. We will save all of our patterns in case we wanna make the bag again. And we'll strike a line across right here on both panels. We'll put basting tape along this raw edge on the top on both panels, and then we will peel off the transfer paper, and we're going to baste down to that line like so. And then we'll put basting tape on top of our single hem to do a double hem. And then just fold it over again. And there's our double hem, and we'll do that with this panel too. And I'm going to use the inside edge of my center foot as the guide for this hem. And I'm just going to sew across the top, doing a little bit of reversing at the beginning. And I'll sew this on the other pocket as well. I removed the patterning material from both of the D2A panels that we cut in half, and I'm going to place this pocket on here so that it is centered. We'll do a straight stitch right here down the center. I'm not going to mark it. You could mark it if you want, but it can show up. So I'm just going to do a straight stitch and do a bunch of reversing here at the top, because there will be stress on this point of the pocket when you put stuff in it. And just repeat the same process with the other pocket on the other half of this panel.
Coming up, we'll be sewing the main body to the zipper.
Now I'm going to take one of the Dacron panels, this is the one with the number 6 on it, and put basting tape right up against that edge at the top of the panel all the way across. And then I will peel off the transfer paper, revealing the glue. And I'm going to take my zipper with the teeth facing down and baste it along this top edge, perfectly flush with the top edge, all the way across. And I do have a little over an inch on this side and about an inch on this side of excess zipper, and I'll trim that away later, but for now this makes it easier. Okay, and then I will apply basting tape on top of this again, right up against that edge, all the way across. Peel up the transfer paper. And I'll take one of my lining panels with the pocket on it, with the pocket face down, and I'll baste it on so that the corners are even and it's flush with this top edge again. Okay, and now we're going to go take it to the sewing machine. So now we have our panel. I like to sew with the teeth side face up so you can use it as a guide. So I will put it in with the outside of the foot right up against the teeth, put my foot down, and I'm going to move my needle into the left position so I can sew alongside the basting tape and not in the middle of it, because I don't want it to show up when I sew my top stitch. Do some reversing here at the beginning and sew all the way across, using the teeth of the zipper as a guide. So now that we've sewn the panels, we're going to flip them both so that you can see the teeth, and then we're going to make sure they're even at the corners on both sides, and use the Sailrite canvas patterning ruler to crease the panels together so that they're easier to sew all the way across. And then I'll check this side to make sure it looks good, and it does. So now we're ready to sew. One more thing before we sew. So on this top plate, we use the stitch as our line for our crease, but if we go to the bottom, I actually creased it a little farther into the zipper. I don't know if you can see that. See how it's a little farther into the zipper? So that I don't miss this lining fabric when I sew this top stitch. So I have my needle in the center position. I want to make sure that I hit this, my Dacron, but I also want to be as close to the zipper teeth as possible. So I have it in the center position because otherwise if I had it in the right, it would miss. And I'm going to hold my trailer, so 1 stitch in reverse here, and then just sew all the way across using the teeth as a guide, the zipper teeth. Do 1 stitch in reversing at the end, and then back to the table we go. Now we're gonna attach the other side of our Dacron and lining fabric in the same manner. Ooh, I want that basting tape close to the edge, so I'm gonna peel it back up. And we wanna make sure that our stitching is the exact same. So we wanna stitch it in the exact same manner so it looks even on both sides of the zipper. So when I put this other Dacron panel on, this is the outside surface, and I want the outside surface to be facing down, so that right outside surfaces will be facing one another when we sew it together. And I'm basting it evenly along the top, just like I did with the other side. Flip it over, and I will put the lining fabric on. So pockets are down, and I baste it on evenly across the top. So that when I flip it over, so here's how it looks when it's done. There's the outside, and here's the inside. And it is possible that you may have to trim off a little bit of either the lining or the Dacron around all of these edges, depending on how it's sewn. And when you're done, one of the most important things is that the sides are almost perfect, almost even. They don't have to be perfect, but they need to be close, just like that. So with these pieces sewn together now, we're gonna actually baste this Dacron to the lining fabric. And this just makes it easier to sew because everything will stay in place. So I'll just put basting tape around the perimeter and baste them together. And then I'll do the same thing with the other side. And then we'll show you what's next. So peel off the transfer paper. And we'll just put this guy down, basting everything so that the edges might line up as best as possible. And there you go. Same thing with this side. So now I'm going to put sliders on, so I'll split the zipper in half, and I'm going to put my slider on, obviously, so it's face up, and you want to get it even on both ends. So even it up, and then just put it on. And we'll do the same thing with another slider going this direction. There we go.
In this chapter, we'll be creating the bag bottom and adding webbing.
Now we have D3A and D3B, which is our last panels, and we'll take the pens out and remove the patterns. Now I'm going to apply basting tape along the top 2 edges of these panels. It's not super important that you're right along the edge, but you want to be somewhat close, because you're never going to see this or anything. Then I'll peel it off. Then I will baste the Sattler marine grade fabric directly on top, making sure all of the edges of the panel are even. Now we're going to cut 2 pieces of webbing. One's going to be 7 inches, and we're using the Sailrite Edge hot knife, the cordless version. We also have a corded version if it's a little cheaper, but I like this one better. And then the Sailrite cutting glass. And then I'm going to touch the end of the other side, and then I'm going to cut 1 piece that's 3 inches. So now I'm going to take the 7-inch piece, and I'm going to put a little piece of basting tape on each end. Now take the 7-inch piece and measure 1 inch down from the short side of the marine grade fabric and baste it in place. Then we'll do a tacking stitch right on the edge of this on both sides. So we have our 7-inch piece tacked onto this end. Now I'm going to take the 3-inch piece and center it. It needs to be close to center on this piece, and then tack it down.
Next, we'll be sewing the bag bottom and binding the seam allowance.
So now I'm going to take my pair of scissors. This is the old pair of scissors that I cut zippers with, and cut the 2 ends of the zipper off. like so. Okay, and then I'm going to put basting tape on the short edges of this panel, just on one end at first. Peel off the transfer paper, and then I will baste this down so that this webbing piece is centered on the zipper. Right like that, oh, just like that. And I'll take it over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew 3/8 inch from this edge. So we're going to sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, so I'm going to put the magnetic sewing guide right up against the outside edge of the foot, and then we're going to put it in under there, and we're just sewing a straight stitch. And I'm going to do some reversing here at the beginning. You're not going to see this stitch, but you do want to keep it at 3/8 inch. And when I come to the webbing, I'm going to reverse over it a bunch of times because there is going to be stress on that webbing. And I'll sew to the end and do a little reversing. I have my needle in the right position and my grosgrain in the 1-inch binder, and I'm going to sew a few stitches just to get it all evened up. And then I will feed this in here and sew all the way across our the two pieces we sewn together. And I don't need to do any reversing at the webbing because I already did that in my first stitch, but I will do some reversing at the end. And now I'm going to take some scissors and trim off the excess I have on the ends. Now that I've sewn that together, I'm going to splay it open like this, and I'm going to do a top stitch across. Okay, we're going to put it under the foot, making sure that we get a nice even straight line matched up with the outside of the inner foot. Put it down, our needle's in the center position. I'll hold the trailer, and then I'm going to do one stitch in reverse, then sew a top stitch across here. And I won't do any reversing on the webbing. Everyone's going to see this stitch, so take your time. And a little bit of reversing at the end. There we go. So now that we've finished our top stitch on this side, we're going to put basting tape along this edge over here. Peel off the transfer paper and baste this with outside surfaces facing one another on top right here, so that it's centered. There we go. And we're going to take it over the sewing machine and sew a 3/8 inch seam allowance right here. Do a little reversing at the beginning and put the binding on the same way we did with the binding on the other side. Then we'll show you it's next. So now that our grosgrain is in place, we're going to open this up and do a top stitch on this side. And you'll have to do it by pulling the bag open like so. And I'm going to pull my webbing out of the way. Put my foot down, put my needle in the center position, do one stitch in reverse here, and then do a top stitch across this side, just like we did on the other side. It's not too bad. It might look a little awkward, but it's not that bad. I'm going to make sure it's all splayed out properly so it looks even, and just keep going.
In this chapter, we'll be sewing around the perimeter of the bag.
So now we are ready to sew the sides together. So outside surfaces face one another, and I'll fold right here on this corner so that these two sides are even, and I'm going to staple this together all the way around the perimeter so it's easier to sew. So I'll just put staples in all the way around, and I can remove these staples later, so it's not a big deal if they are close to the seam allowance. Then here at the corner, I will put a slit to help it take this corner about 3/8 inch from the edge and no deeper than my seam allowance. A little bit deeper cut than that probably. There we go. There we go. Staple right here. This is all straightaway, so you don't really need as many staples here. And it looks like it's going to turn out great. there's these two sides matched up right there. We gotta make sure we want this pockets all the way up. I didn't baste this down. You could baste it down so it sticks to the other piece, but it's fine as long as you get it in your staple. And we're ready to sew. So you could use the magnetic sewing guide here, but we're not gonna use it so you can see better. We are doing a 3/8 inch stitch all the way around, so the outside of this foot is my guide. So I'll just keep that up against the outside of the fabric the whole time. And I will start right here at the beginning, and I will do some reversing here. And I'll hold my trailer and do a bunch of reversing up here in this corner, because that's where some stress could be. And then we're gonna sew around the perimeter, trying to keep that foot up against that outside edge. If you get a little off, it'll be okay, it's not a big deal, but it's best if you can keep it up against that edge. Okay, come up to our slit, and I'm gonna stop, bury my needle right on top of that, even if it requires me to manipulate the stitch a little bit with the forward reverse lever. Probably a little bit more than that actually, right there. Lift the foot, rotate the fabric, splay it back out, lower the foot, sew down this side. Pretty easy, especially with it stapled in place. Here's another corner. I'm just gonna make sure I get it positioned the way I want so it's easier to stop. Sew up to the corner. Bury the needle, and then have it come up a little bit. Rotate it, push the fabric back through, lower, finish sewing. So we're back here at the table, and I'm just gonna look at the stitch all the way around the perimeter and make sure it falls within about the 3/8 inch. And if it doesn't, like see over here on this binding, it's a little bit deeper. I'm actually just gonna trim this off. That way I can bind the edge more easily. And then I will remove all the staples. So we're about to do the same thing on this side, staple it together and sew. But before I do that, I'm gonna open this zipper a little bit because these are locking sliders. And if I try to open it from up here afterwards, it's really difficult. So I'll open it first and then I'll staple just like I did on the other side. So we forgot to sew reversing over our webbing on the other side. So you see how you can see the webbing right there? I have my needle buried. We're gonna sew reversing when we come to this point because we need to reinforce it. And then I'll go back to the other side and sew reinforcing on that webbing as well because there is gonna be some stress on it. So I'm gonna do a bunch of reversing right here. Okay, and we'll just finish sewing and I'll go back to the other side and reverse over that webbing too, making sure the stitch is in the same 3/8 inch seam allowance.
Next up, we'll be binding our seam allowance.
So we're ready for binding. We're gonna bind this edge, and then this bottom edge so that we don't have to take these 90-degree turns because it's really hard to do. Okay, so we'll start here. I have my needle in the right position. So now we're gonna bind the two short edges first. Same process as binding that other edge. I'm gonna do some reversing when I get into my fabric right here. My needle is in the right position, and then I'm gonna feed it in there and try to cover those stitches, because that's the goal. There we go. And then I'll do some reversing down here at the bottom. Okay, and now we'll bind this side. Same process. So I trim this top edge, leaving a little bit of extra up here. And then down here at the bottom, I'm gonna trim it flush because I'm gonna bind over it. And I'll do the same thing over here, making sure that this is flush with the bottom. And now I'm gonna bind this bottom edge. And now we're binding the bottom edge, same process. Hold my trailers, do some reversing in the fabric right here. And I'll do a little bit more reversing because this is where the actual ends meet. And then I'll just feed it in there, making sure I'm covering that stitch all the way down. I'm back at the table. I haven't done the other side yet, but I'm gonna use a hot knife to touch up these ends so that they're nice and flush right there. We don't wanna go too far because we don't wanna burn our fabric. This one, I'm going to touch down up here at the top, and I gotta be very careful not to touch the cotton. So I'm just gonna touch it and press it together. It's hot. Same thing on this end. If you didn't have a binder, you can actually put double-sided tape down both edges of this grosgrain and bind it by hand. So I'm gonna put double-sided tape down this edge and down this edge, and then we'll show you how to put it onto the bag. We're going to peel off the transfer paper, and then I'm going to put it on there so that it's centered over this edge, and just stick it on all the way down there to the bottom. And now I'm going to trim it flush down here at the bottom and do the same thing over here on this side, and then do the same thing on the bottom. This is pretty easy. Since the grosgrain is so soft and doesn't have much of a hand, it actually can be hard to put in to fold through the binder. So this way might actually be easier. So if you want to try both approaches, go for it. I think that this is the approach I prefer. Now we're going to sew our grosgrain all the way around the perimeter. And one of the nice things about this is you don't have to stop and sew the second leg on, so you can actually just turn at the corners. And we'll show you what's next once we're done. Now the bag's complete and we're ready to turn it right side out. So background's a little stiff, or sailcloth as they call it, so you gotta really work at it. This could take a couple minutes, but not too bad. Then you want to push these corners down. So each corner, I'm going to work on them one by one. Get them all pushed out. Here's the handle on one side to carry it. It also can be used to open and close it, just like the little pull tab on the other side. And we got our 4 little pockets on the inside. See those? This side and this side.
Our Dopp bag is now complete. You can find a link to the other 2 tutorial videos in this bag kit in the description below. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be notified when new videos become available. I'm Seth Grant, and from all of us here at Sailrite, thanks for watching.
Okay, we have the cover in, and looks good. Fabric feels fresh. What we're doing at this point, we confirm that you do have the outside to the outside, which is good. What we've done here is we put a trash can underneath the material without any seams, and we've dumped water in to see if we get any leaking. It is beading the way we would expect, so right now it looks good, but we won't know until after maybe the end of the day if we see if water is leaking through. We do notice up front here, you do have a fairly long seam that would be at a pitch that is not top stitched, and that will leak like a sieve. So we're going to dump water in this too to watch that and see what happens. But we expect this one to leak through very quickly. But this would only represent what looks like maybe 3 foot at the bow of the boat. So if it's leaking everywhere else, I'm not sure if that's the answer. Looked at your top stitches on the other seams, and they look fine to us. So we're going to do our initial testing before we send this off to Glen Raven and Sunbrella. Thank you. Okay.